I've occasionally adopted tags like Radio Free Iowa, and I was stalked by John Stockwell, and various trigger systems emerged in response to my writing that appeared to have originated with Jeffrey Corporation and its allies. And the labor union has tried to ferret out the idea that there was something irregular in my interviewing Peter Gabriel, which of course I made a big celebration sound about because I wanted to raise my public image, having a bag of deafness thrown over my head, and a nightmare engulfed me. In those days, he was in Amnesty International. But the origins of this concept that Crary is sending signals again, which is squelched by psychiatrists who says he imagines that there's a response to them, came from Brecker, who said you can kill somebody with your mind. And this is Israeli grueling mania for censorship. The sad fact is that Brian Eno is in league with whoever who's doing it. People like Low-Key keep a tabulator, register of pimped ideas. The social services in Tacoma have made clear that they've cased out what little wreckage there is left of my father's kin. It's of dubitable legality, because you're not allowed to draft deaf people. There was a dude, I forget his name, he was once well known in circles of the press, who snitched a CIA agent once. And people went, oh, he was like Bob Casey, the math teacher at Taylor Alderdice, whose name was recognizable enough that Top, who I believe worked with Dolly Myron on the inside case of my abduction, convinced to run for office, and he was elected, even though he was widely seen as Barnaby the Scrivener's level of mediocrity or beyond. And it stands to reason that the intellectuals at the University of Pittsburgh and CMU, like Katofsky and Carbonell, and the friends of friends of the friends of Al Dugan, who made Andrea Swimmer's little chase him up the tree tapes for Braunstein and McCartney, would use a battered, toxified, deaf individual for their compromat warfare behind the scenes. You know, the issue for me is very different from the issue for them. The issue for them was put by David McWade as damage control. They went along with the Venus flytrap war game, which means Lenin Houdini is awkward for them. To their credit, the Russians tipped me off as to Lenin Houdini. It's probably a dare because their case monitors make a big fuss about the Israelis getting tapes of me smoking marijuana in the city of Pittsburgh growing up. This didn't deter Mayor Peduto from admitting that I was a victim of horrible acts. And the angle is cowardly because the Andrew Swimmer was clearly an agent. That was perfectly obvious to anybody who even scanned the details of the situation. So, what really gives is that forensic assertive, by which we mean organized gaslighting. Gaslighting is domestic terrorism from the government, is in charge of routine harassment and attempts to sabotage my recovery from torture. I didn't think that they would resort to poisoning me with Parkinson's, but I did know they were going to murder somebody because they uh, said that allowing me to castrate them would get them to not do so, which I saw when I went along with the Atenolol program. They murdered somebody anyway because they're fiendishly, I don't mean to demonize them, but they're behind the genocide of the AIDS attack. And what they did was they got the Medicare care worker system organized by the people who did it to dole out privileges and announce a war game of a lottery system for control of the papers. I don't know why Seattle would go along with that. I wanted to get information. I tried to warn my peers. But what I was up against were hysterical ninnies. The drummer for Salt Chunk Mary, for example, said, "Oh, were you jealous because you did drugs? Is that what you're saying?" Well, that's the way that she was in place to announce the discovery that an Attica State Prison psychiatrist had used a neurotoxin on me as a very little boy. And he was working with Leslie Katz in orchestrating a frenzy about my chivalry. I mean, I gave her a tongue lashing, but that's about it. I mean, I don't really see what the big deal was. Well, they said this provides a plausible story for the executive to say that Joseph Goebbels is in the Jewish Defense League, which is what they said. They had a Joseph Goebbels dacoit on Mount Desert Island who was working through the grapevine with the gang that Wattenmaker was in. McGarvey knew him at Tyler Art School. So the stupids basically said, we want the money. We're going to turn this into not an issue of public safety, public health, rescue of our fourth estate, the dignity of the press, the safety of James McRiley McCrary, the protection of disabled people from being drafted, God forbid, by a secret Russian apparatus working with the U.S. Marines and the Israelis in their hot wire switchboard. We're not going to do that. What we're going to say is that this is a war about money. And they killed Shannon at the penny line of the Neva, pornographic symbol of the sea and the Star of David. You know, and they want me to stay in Brecker's allegation that I killed somebody with my mind, which was what he was talking about back in 72, 73. After slipping, peace porridge stuck to Gleaner when I was 9 years old. Michael Reagan's favorite scene some more. So this is all a song and dance about justifying the, the pornographic genocide. Now, how the Dugans were used is abominable. I mean, blood curdling. How I was used was blood curdling too. And I'm not in it for a message to the masses. I'm in it to demonstrate what the situation indicates to the press so that my peers and community can be advised, so that the perpetrators can be apprehended and stopped. As for the idea that I paint suspicion with a broad brush, this is a fancy of people who have blended in to muddy the tracks of the perpetrators. Peter Gabriel doesn't like being held as an object of suspicion. And his communications community, Eno and Putin, don't like that either. Well, how about stopping to pretend that you weren't working with the people who did it in a cover operation then? It seems they can't extricate themselves from the situation, so they are dedicated to the mania of an operation to make the Almighty Slander of Andrea Swimmer into the triumphant history books of the Zappa Encyclopedia. I mean, it's very indecent. Do I feel threatened personally? Well, of course, I was attacked and tortured. It's a terrorism campaign of an international direction, but they're playing sleight of hand with whodunit games from the parlor of the Zionists like Cyril Wecht. I'm not looking to pin the tail on an imaginary donkey. They refuse to stop playing that game, but I'm not. What I found was that Will Zell was bold enough to come clean about what they were pulling. And everybody in Pittsburgh was hiding that they already knew what they were pulling because they had this little black box about John Lennon, which turned out to have been a war game going back to World War One in media hymnography, in which he got the starring role. And his role was to make it into not the public reputation of the West and advising people of what was threatening them when they were at risk, but a spoils fight over a little bit of property money. I mean, it's a big kitty for someone like me who's never lived above the poverty line, but these are trillionaires just passing around money bags as a way of damaging the judgment of the poor. I mean, it's really a farce and it's really sickening. All of it is. Everything that's happened is. And they want to make it look like karma. It's ridiculous. It's like Rock'em Sock'em Robots, only from the deep state, with people who don't even, like a 14-year-old kid walked out his front door and was sniped. And they want to dig into his past and say, oh, he had a Palestinian flag on his school book. What happened to Gaza is an eternal crime. And I must say, I agree with Dugan. The Barbarossa was a fucking atrocity. I mean, it's not that I don't enjoy reading you, Mr. Dugan. I really do enjoy reading you. It's the way that it got wired into this warning about Brecker's mystery switchboard. I mean, I very decidedly was given a insider's heads up from somebody who was close enough to the Israeli snipers to see how sick they are before you popped up and screamed right. You know, let's not imagine that this is a cruelly inclined manipulation on the level of media bullies. No, I dispute that I was sending signals or doing anything to cross George Bush. He's an evil idiot of some sort. I was a deaf man who told the chancellor about how I had been kidnapped and tortured by Ronnie and Casper and the Pittmans in their stolen car. Show that Trace, the McIntosh, and Serby and Carl. These are people who were in the military. But you can't go around saying that Andrea Swimmer had the right to use me for an organized pornographic empire through force of brutality by an armed adult gang that would circle the school looking for me to prevent me from attending. I was a grade school child in the Pittsburgh public school. Now, somebody overdubbed that this situation is insane. It's unfortunately strategically a takeover from Nosferatu and Wanamaker's crowd. They took me to the Incredible two-headed transplant, and they had a moron with an evil guy on his back saying, I want to teach this moron how to walk. That was Israel's attitude about the United States. It would be a good idea for some people to let it sink into their heads that Israel sees the United States as a fatted calf and a moron who they have to teach how to walk. The way I feel about Professor Durgan is that he's a brilliant philosopher. I don't blame him for being upset. The reason I don't talk about Twisted Ankle Louie is because none of those guys have the sense to just leave someone alone. You can't draft a disabled person into the military. It's illegal in the United States of America. Oh, they're so law-abiding that they can overrule that. I understand, Louis. You're so law-abiding that you can overrule the law of the United States. That makes perfect sense, Louis.